All right, everybody. Sorry, I didn't know the camera was on there. Welcome to the 2019 Association of Black Psychologists Conference. And I am going to be introducing our keynote speaker today, who is going to be Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark. So many of you all probably know her from the way in which she and her husband, Dr. Kenneth Clark, testified in the Brown versus Board of Education case. But she also has made some other contributions to the field of psychology, and I'm just going to kind of brush over them a little bit in this video today. So Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark was originally born in Hot Springs, Arkansas around the time of the Great Depression. So many of you know that the Great Depression was a time of economic turmoil for a lot of people. Despite that, she actually had a pretty good upbringing, reported a pretty good childhood. She received, when it was time to go to college, she received an array of different scholarships and whatnot, but she chose to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. So she originally chose to major in biology and physics, but she found that she was not too interested in those things once she got started. This was also around the time that she met her husband, Dr. Kenneth Clark. Well, he wasn't Dr. Kenneth Clark then, yeah. So he was actually a psychology major. He convinced her to switch over to psychology, and he and she both ended up getting their bachelor's and master's degrees from Howard University in psychology. Later on, Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark went to Columbia University, and she was actually the only woman of color in the psychology program at that time. When she graduated, she was not only was she the first African American woman to graduate from that program, but she was only the second African American period to graduate with a PhD from that program, her husband being the first. So after kind of graduating with her PhD from Columbia University, she ran into some challenges finding employment, being a woman in psychology, and also being a woman of color. That presented a lot of different barriers. So she kind of did some odd jobs or whatnot. She did like some consulting work, did some grading assessments and things of that nature. So originally, after that, she and her husband ended up founding their own practice in Harlem, New York for minority children to receive psychological services because they kind of realized the need for it and realized that minority children, specifically African Americans, were not necessarily being represented in mental health. So I'm going to talk a little bit about her major contribution, or what she's mostly known for, which is the doll experiment. So she and her husband conducted a doll experiment in which they selected 250 African American children. I believe a little over half of the children went to segregated schools and half went to schools that were racially integrated. So they had, I think it was 4 dolls. All of the dolls were identical in nature as far as like their clothing and and whatnot. I'm sorry, I'm getting tripped up on my words. But a couple of the dolls were white and the other were black. So they asked the children questions like, which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the good doll? And what they found was that for most of these children, they referred to the white doll as the good doll, the white doll as the nice doll, and the black doll was referred to as the bad doll, or the doll that you did not want to play with. They found that most of the children I left out a question. They also asked the kids which doll most accurately kind of represents, your identity or who you are. Now, mind you, the study consists of solely black children, but a lot of the children pointed to the white doll, saying that this doll, accurately kind of represented what they looked like and, their identity or whatnot. And so what they found was that a lot of the children who went to the segregated schools, which means that they were in school with with other black children, they had kind of like a harder time, forming their identity, like recognizing who they were, recognizing their good characteristics and whatnot. So now back to the case. So the Brown versus Board of Education case was basically a landmark case, a big victory for like the whole civil rights movement at that time. So what happened was there was a child, last name was Brown, that her parents wanted her to go to the nearby school. I guess it was pretty close. But that school was not segregated, so it was a white school. So the school was close. They tried to admit their child to the school. They were told that they would have to. She couldn't go there. They were going to have to bus their child to the school for colored children, far away. And so they ended up kind of filing suit. A bunch of other different kind of parents and their children kind of joined in on the lawsuit, and it ended up going to the Supreme Court. And so there was this whole notion of kind of like separate but equal, because earlier there was a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, in which the courts had ruled that it was okay for schools to be segregated as long as there was equality. So it was okay for you to have a black and a white school as long as they had, the same materials, were learning the same things and whatnot. But what they found in this case was that the schools were in fact not equal at all. And Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark and her husband, Kenneth Clark, were actually called on as expert witnesses in this particular case to kind of testify about their work that they had done with the doll experiment. And basically they suggested that, in order for children to form healthy identity and self-concept and self-efficacy, they needed to be integrated. So that was a big part of that case. So the Supreme Court ended up ultimately ruling overthrowing the notion that separate but equal was appropriate. And so that was a huge, like I said, huge victory for the civil rights movement, because it made segregating schools illegal. And so that was a big thing. And so this black psychologist, this woman, her work was, a major contribution to a huge milestone, in the civil rights movement, and, making it okay for, blacks to go to school with whites or with other races. So it was very, very, very important. Aside from that, Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark was also just really involved in her community. She was, now in the Harlem area, she was instrumental in the initiation of a Head Start program. So I don't know how much you guys know about Head Start, but usually it's for children who are kind of low resource, low SES, children who probably are not really getting the resources that they probably would need to be successful in school. Basically, it allows them to go to I think it's like preschool, or like when they're 3, I think they can enroll in about 3, but it gives them a head start. They get to learn different skills and things of that nature before they go to kindergarten, so that they can be as successful as possible. And that program, which is actually still running today, there are a bunch of different Head Start programs across the country. But that program was very important for, minority children, specifically black children, because they weren't always afforded the same level of educational resources as other people. So it allowed them a way to kind of be able to level the playing field a little bit and be successful when they did go to school. Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark was also involved in a lot of community boards. She and her husband, like I said, they had their own kind of private practice, which offered mental health services, but it also offered a lot of education-based services to people in the children and family in the Harlem area who probably wouldn't have access to those resources had that institution not been there. But yeah, that's just a synopsis of, you know, Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark. I think personally it's always important to me to highlight not only a Black psychologist, but a Black woman psychologist, because obviously they have paved the way for me, to be able to take this career path. And yeah, so that is all. Thank you.